How's it going, everyone? My name is Eli. I'm a fourth-year medical student at the University of Iowa, and today I'm going to give a little presentation on what I did to study for the Usmle Step 1. If you're like me, you're probably scrambling through the internet looking for different ways to study, different sources on what to do best, so I thought it would be reasonable to share my strategy and what I did. So here we go. So how to get a 250 plus on Step 1, or if you're taking it a year from now or 2 years from now, how to just pass Step 1. So the resources that I use are listed here. They're not in any particular order of importance, but these are the ones that I use, and it worked out pretty well for me. So first one being YouWorld. Everybody uses YouWorld. First Aid, the book, everybody pretty much uses First Aid. Usmle RX is a different one that I'll go through that not many people use, but I guess I don't know how many people exactly use it, but I used it and I liked it a lot. Sketchy, Micro, and Pharm is another big one that I liked. Pathology, and then MBME and YouWorld self-assessments. So we'll go through each one of these individually. So First Aid and Usmle RX is the first one that I wanted to talk about. So my study plan was basically, I started reading First Aid 6 months before my test date. So it was around July of that year, right after the July break, I started reading the First Aid. So how I did this was I read a chapter a week, and how I chose what chapter to read, I based it off of what rotation I was doing at that time. So if I was doing peds, I would do the section, the peds section, or neurology, I would do the neurology section, and I would do that every single week, just to kind of help me keep on track of studying for Step 1 while I was doing my clinical rotations as well. And of course, some people still have, the two years of preclinicals. The school that I go to has the 1.5 year preclinicals, and then we go into the clinics after the 1.5 years. So it just kind of depends as well on your clinical rotations. So for First Aid, I personally used Usmle RX to watch the videos for each chapter. I honestly love doing it. I would highly recommend it. I thought it was awesome. It depends on what type of learner you are, though. So if you can read a book and fully comprehend everything, that's awesome. But if you're a more visual learner and like to use videos to learn, I would say this is definitely a good thing for you to try out. And so what I recommend is each chapter you do in First Aid, follow along with the videos on Usmle RX, because it goes chapter by chapter and does a really good job of explaining. I would also recommend you take notes in your First Aid book while you're watching these, because they go in a little bit more depth sometimes than what's actually offered in the book. And so when it comes to Usmle RX, it's actually written by the same authors as First Aid, so that's another reason why I highly recommend it. And then the RX portion actually offers questions as well, and I did actually order that, and I did about 40 questions a week during that 6-month period, and I thought it prepared me pretty well to start doing YouWorld questions during my dedicated time. So by the time I started dedicated, I had done a complete pass through First Aid and Usmle RX. So after that 6 months, I took 5 weeks of dedicated time. During the time of dedicated, during that 5 weeks, I read through First Aid again, but I didn't watch the videos for RX twice. I only watched the videos for RX once, and then while I was watching those videos, though, I was taking notes. So when I went through First Aid the second time during dedicated, I had notes to use, which I thought was very helpful. The next resource I highly recommend is Pathology. So there's one guy that wrote this book, and he does the lectures, video lectures. So this guy is really, really good in my opinion. I'm pretty sure he's a pathologist, which would make sense. So what I did during this as well, similar to First Aid, I watched the lectures and I followed through with the textbook. Again, he goes into a little bit more depth than what the textbook offers, so I took notes with this as well. In total, there's around 35 hours worth of videos, and you can actually 2 times speed it, which again I would recommend. So in my opinion, pathology is pretty difficult, and Step 1 actually does have quite a bit of it, but he does a really good job of making it more easily understandable, and he gives good examples as well with a lot of pictures, which I found very helpful. So when it comes to the actual content of this book, there is a lot of redundancy to first aid. They say a lot of similar things about a lot of topics, but in my opinion, it helps seeing different topics multiple times in different ways. So I would encourage you to watch all the videos and go through this entire book. So again, I started 6 months before dedicated, and I did the chapters that I was doing during rotations and things like that. So again, OBGYN, I did the OBGYN chapter, neurology chapter, and I did finish my first pass of Pathoma before my 5 weeks of dedicated started. And during my 5 weeks of dedicated, I went through the entire book the second time, but again, I didn't watch the videos. When I watched the videos the first time, I took notes in my Pathoma book, and then it made it really easy to keep up and remember what the videos showed based on my notes. So two passes total in Pathoma. This is another that honestly, this is probably one of the ones that isn't utilized enough in my opinion. This was probably, if you ask me, this is one of definitely due for step 1. So sketchy. So I started watching, again, 6 months prior to my dedicated. I started watching these videos. I watched micro first, so I did like micro bacteria, then I did virus, then I did like fungi, and then after that I did the pharmacology. Pharmacology is a little bit more dense because you have to know all the mechanisms and side effects and things like that, but I'm telling you this, without this, my micro and pharm would have been not great, but this definitely helped me. So after completing all the videos, I actually used, there's a sketchy PDF out there somewhere, and then there's also an Anki deck that you can use to review as well. And actually, I got it off of Reddit. You can just kind of Google sketchy PDF or sketchy Anki deck, and you should be able to find it on Reddit pretty easily. And that's how I did. That's how I found it. And you can go through that as many times as you want. I think I went through PDF once and Anki deck once, maybe once and a half. And I'm telling you, when I was doing these questions, like practice questions on the real test, I would get a question about like a drug, and I don't know how it works, but I literally just pictured, I saw a drug, I remember the picture in sketchy, and it just came, like the answer just come right back to me. So I can't tell you how many questions I got right based on these, but I can tell you that it was a lot. So for these, you can actually 2 or 3 times speed these. I did 2 times speed for these. In total, there's about 13.5 hours of micro and then 27 hours of pharmacology. Another one, the obvious one, the YouWorld that everybody uses. So for YouWorld, the way I did it was I didn't actually use YouWorld until I started my 5-week period of dedicated studying, and it worked okay for me. I did end up finishing all of them. There's around 3,000 questions. I think and I did about 80 to 120 questions a day. I didn't really have a problem finishing it. I think I finished it with probably like 5 days to spare with my 5 week dedicated period. So what I did was I did 40 question blocks, including all subjects, and so it would represent kind of the actual test. And so I started off with doing really bad, like, I don't know, like 50, I think I ended up getting like multiple 50-some percents. But every week I improved quite a bit. So I jumped from like the 50s to, the 70s within a matter of a couple weeks, and then it just kept improving from there. So just keep on working, and it'll pay off. So what I did is a little bit unorthodox, I think, because I don't know any of my classmates that really did this method, but so YouWorld has a function to be able to make a flashcard from like the questions that you get. So after doing a set of 40 questions, during my review, I would make flashcards from each question. So you'll notice after you play with YouWorld for a little bit, if you highlight like a sentence, you can just highlight it and right click, and it'll give you an option to make flashcards. So that's what I did. Anytime I had content that I wanted to see again in the future, just to refresh my memory, I would just make a flashcard from it. So I ended up going, after finishing my 3,000 questions and having 5 days or so before the test, I used these flashcards and I went through them during those 5 days. And so I got, in the matter of 5 days, I resaw basically all 3,000 of those questions in flashcard form, and I really think that helped me. So on the contrary, I know people that use YouWorld for the entire 6 months, whereas I use the 6 months with first aid, pathoma, sketchy, things like that. Some people actually start doing YouWorld 6 months in advance as a way of learning rather than as a way of testing their knowledge. So I used it as a way of testing my knowledge during dedicated, but again, it depends on how you study and what type of resources you want to use. So just for a reality check, these blocks aren't fun, just like studying isn't necessarily fun all the time. So they're not fun, but they really do help you prepare. The question stems, getting used to like reading the questions and knocking out answer choices will really help you during test day. So another thing I used pretty often was the MBME practice test. So I ended up taking, I want to say around 5 tests. So I took one test 2 months before dedicated, and I failed miserably. So 2 months before I started studying, before my 5-week dedicated, I took a test, and I think I may have maybe passed it, but just like barely passed it. So this actually gave me more motivation to study, and I actually encourage you guys to give this an attempt as well, just to see where you're at before things start really picking up. So during my 5 weeks of dedicated, I took a test every Friday. So my real test was going to be on a Friday, so I wanted to kind of represent that. So I took a practice MBME every single Friday during dedicated, and I reviewed it that same day. So I took a total of 4 MBME tests during my dedicated period. In addition to that, I also took 2 YouWorld self-assessments. They were on there. I think they're like $40 each. These are super good confidence builders. So I took these kind of closer to my test date, and I did pretty well on both of them. And I think that they're an accurate score representation, but I think they're a little bit easier than the real thing. So just keep that in mind. But if you need a confidence booster, I would definitely sign up for the 2 YouWorld self-assessments and knock those out kind of closer to the test day, so you build up some confidence beforehand. So overall, I highly recommend doing at least a few practice tests, whether it be YouWorld self-assessments or MBMEs. It's worth the money in the grand scheme of things. I know it's $60 a test, but it's definitely worth it to kind of build your stamina and get a good representation of what the test is actually like. So in my opinion, the real test was actually easier than these MBME tests. And you kind of see this picture graphic right here. It gives you a little bit of a performance summary after your test is done. It shows you what your strengths and weaknesses are. So this slide shows the overall timeline of what I did to study. So first of all, again, 6 months prior to dedicated, I started my studying. I first started with first aid and Usmle RX, 1 chapter each week, depending on what rotation I was on. I started sketchy micro. After that, I started to do the sketchy farm. After that, I then started pathoma as well, again, chapter each week, and I used the chapter I chose on depending on what I was on first aid. So I wanted to keep the topics similar each week. 2 months prior to dedicated, I took a practice MBME test that was paid for by my school. Again, I did pretty poorly on it, but it gave me a little bit of motivation to keep studying. During my dedicated, which again was a total of 5 weeks, at that time by the time I started, I had finished my first path of first aid, sketchy, and pathoma. During my dedicated, I did another pass through first aid and pathoma, but I did not use the videos associated with them. I just read the book and the notes that I took from watching the video the first time. In addition to that, I used the sketchy PDF and the sketchy Anki deck. So I think I did 1.5 passes through each of them because I kind of ran out of time. But that is something you can find on Reddit. And if not, there's I'm sure older classmates that might have that access. And then when it comes to practice tests, I took a total of 4 NBMEs and then 2 YouWorld self-assessments, 1 a week. You can see here I have this image of Cram Fighter. So this is one method that I know a lot of people use to keep track of their study time. It is kind of expensive. It's like $29 a month, but during my dedicated time, it was really helpful to keep me on track. You put in all your sources and it tells you exactly what you need to do each day to get done by the day that you want to get done by. So I thought that was really helpful. and it's worth it to check it out. Links to the different resources that I use. So YouWorld, you just go to this website and get that. Pathoma, you can go to this website. If someone were to contact, if someone wanted to contact Pathoma from your school, if there's multiple people that want to use it, they oftentimes give you a discount. That's what they did for my school. First aid and Usmle RX. First aid I got on Amazon, and then this website here is where I got the Usmle RX. Sketchy, again, you can go to this website and get that. The Sketchy PDF and Anki deck are on Reddit. That's where I found it. Otherwise, you can ask older classmates. I'm sure that some of them use this in the past. I didn't want to put that on here just because they have copyrights and stuff like that I don't want to violate. So. At the end of the day, thank you very much. I'm going to attach an Excel sheet so you can. It's a pretty good resource actually to keep track of your studies. It's got all these different resources and then some on it, so you can track exactly where you are throughout the month. And then you can just leave a comment below if you have any questions. And then if you are feeling up to it, or when you have time during your step 2 studying, go ahead and check out my videos on how to get 250 on step 2 CK as well. Have a good one. Thanks.